I think that families, parents really need to get involved in the education of their own children. Look, I'm a great believer in state education, obviously. It's my whole life. However, I think that it can undermine parental responsibility for their own children. But don't expect the school to do everything, because some schools are better than other schools. Some teachers are better than other teachers.
Hi, my name is Phil Dye. Welcome to Filtered, episode 18. As you just heard in the introduction there are teachers who aren't much chop and there are schools that aren't much chop. Of course, most teachers are great. But this episode is all about Australia's education formula and what's working and what's not working. Australia has an underlying education formula which may have worked very well when Australia was new, but it's not working very well now. The truth is, it's working disastrously for students in this country, and it's not working at all well for parents. The education formula in Australia is based on the public system, which is funded by government, and the private system, which is mainly funded by the individual, but also with additions from the government. So if you go to a public school in Australia, most of it's covered by the government. You'll pay for excursions and little bits of extra things. If you go to a private school, you might pay, if it's a secondary school, maybe $20,000 a year for the student, plus the government will add a little bit and give some to the school. But there's this constant argy-bargy between proponents of the public sector and those who favour the private sector. It has been like this ever since I was alive anyway. It's a public versus private debate. Is the private schools, are they getting too much money? Are the public schools getting enough? What we should have done is take a lead from the UK, where instead of the government funding the system and funding the private schools, funding the public schools, they actually fund the individuals. They fund the parents according to their children. So in the UK, for example, every child gets a certain amount of money to go to school. Now they don't get the money, of course, and really either do the parents, but it's allocated to that child and the parents decide where that money is going to go for their education, for that child, for that year. It's much fairer. It gives absolute full control to the parents. So what we need is a completely different system, a system that is not controlled by government. It's not controlled by the most recent fad that comes in, and it's a system that gives parents choice. My guest for this episode is Katherine Birbalsingh from the Michaela School in Wembley, labelled as the strictest teacher in the UK. I can assure you she's not. She's a very, very fair person, although she has very stern beliefs and follows those through. I interviewed Katherine back in 2023 before tongue cancer shut me up for a while, and this is an edited version of that, but with special attention to the school formula and for building a new school system in Australia. Because coming up to a general election, if a political party can embrace this system, the free school system, as a policy, they would get nearly every parent's vote, I can tell you. So not private, not public, but something in the middle, and where the money goes to the parents for them to decide. That, to me, is a vote winner. What is a free school?
The free schools in Britain came about in 2010. The idea is to give the school certain freedoms that perhaps ordinary community schools wouldn't have, to be able to do things differently.
But do you have to follow the national curriculum, everything that's in that?
So the freedoms that I referred to mean that you could not follow the national curriculum if you didn't want to. So the other thing that a free school is, like charter schools in America, is that it's a group of people who have set the school up, as opposed to it's just a school that's been set up by the government. people have got together, so I got together with like-minded other teachers, and we decided we wanted this ethos, and we were moving forward with it. Whereas with other schools, it's a bit more of a mixed bag. You'll get some teachers who are traditional, some teachers who are progressive, some teachers that are in between. All of our teachers here are traditional. And that's because we went forward, we started with that ethos, and we were very clear about it because it was a school that belonged to us. There's a sense of ownership over a free school or over a charter school that wouldn't necessarily exist with other schools.
And as Katherine said, the free school system started about 16 years ago under a Conservative government, equivalent like to the Liberal Party here, and it's been carried on by the Labor Party under Starmer, because they would know that if they tried to dump the free school system, there would be an outrage, an absolute outrage. These free schools, as Katherine said, can do things differently. But does the government exert any authority at all? Let's hear the answer from Robert Peel from the West London Free School.
The government thought the only way that we're going to challenge these ideas is to give teachers the freedom to establish new schools with no predecessor organisation, which can innovate and do things differently. And they would call these schools free schools because these schools were free from local authority control. They would still be state schools, but they would have the autonomy to do things differently. There are now over 600 of them. We pioneered a knowledge-based curriculum. We quickly gained a reputation for being one of the strictest schools in the country. Whether that was deserved or not is debatable. But we are strict, but we're very warm as well. It's not a shouty, nasty, unpleasant atmosphere. And we trained our staff in teacher-led direct instruction approaches. And actually, if you look at the top 4 schools in the country for GCSE results at 16, 3 are free schools that have been established in the last 15 years. So this ability to challenge progressive ideas by establishing new institutions, I would say, is one of the most successful government policies in the UK in the last 15 years.
So if free schools have autonomy, what about exams? I asked Katherine about this.
I have to say, there isn't a single free school that isn't following the national curriculum.
Everyone is, because they've got to do the same exams, I suppose.
You have to do the same exams. Parents would be very concerned if you were not, offering the national curriculum. But we are a free school, and we have done things very differently, even though we're following the national curriculum.
So a free school can cover the national curriculum and know that the students will be examined on that because it's factually based, but they don't have to do everything that the government insists on, as in schools in Australia. So in the case of an Australian free school, or it could be called an open school, whatever they want to call this type, it could be a matter of excluding students with certain characteristics. For example, a student who has exhibited poor behaviour, terrible behaviour, they've been expelled from 2-3 schools. Now the rules in Australia are that some other school has got to take them, but a free school or an open school in Australia could say, no, you've been expelled from this school, we are not going to accept you. That's their ethos. Another one could be to not accept students who can't speak English. And these rules could also come down to religion and beliefs. A Catholic open school or a Catholic free school may only take Catholics. A Christian free school could only take Christians. There could be a Buddhist school that will only take Buddhists. And now this next one, and I'm going to get some hate mail from some parents because of it, it could be that the school does not accept students with some disabilities. At the moment in Australia, a student with a disability has to be put into a mainstream classroom, all under the DEI, diversity, equity and inclusion banner. Everyone had to be included. That means that some students with extreme disabilities cannot learn, they cannot understand the curriculum, they have to have a special teacher's aide with them all of the time, and the poor students, and it's not their fault, cannot achieve. They cannot reach their potential because the expectations are just are just too high. Now, this started about 5 years ago, and the government has been closing down schools for special purpose. Those special schools who could employ teachers who are equipped to deal with these students and best help them on their way. At the moment, it's being left up to mainstream teachers who aren't trained in all of this. My experience is that my daughter was at a public school. I used to go into the school and teach them a bit of music. And once I was in there, and there was a boy at the back of the class with a special assistant teacher who was calling out constantly. He was yelling, he was calling out. He had extreme autism and cerebral palsy. He could not possibly learn and do what the rest of the class was doing. Not his fault at all that he was there. He didn't ask to be there. But here he was in the mainstream classroom and disrupting it every 30 seconds with calling out, with screaming out. Now, that public school had to accept that child. The free school or the open school in Australia could say, no, we are not accepting that child. That child belongs in a special school with special teachers who can bring out the best that that boy is capable of. But this school is not for him. So the free and open schools in Australia, just like the UK, could set their own rules. And this is not something that can occur now. The closest thing has been St Joseph's College in Sydney, who refused to accept transgender students. So they have come down hard, and they will face all sorts of opposition because of it. So why does our government in Australia not have the concept of free schools? Well, one reason is that, facts aside, the government would lose control of the ideology that's being preached to children in our schools. It's not just the facts. 2 and 2 equals 4. You can't change that. But it's what the kids should think. Not teaching them how to think, but what they think. And with free schools, they would lose control of that. Another reason is that our schools seem to have lost control of boundaries and standards. It's sort of an anything goes. Behaviour is terrible in a lot of our schools. Some students are scared to go to school. So we've lost these boundaries, we've lost the standards. And free schools may well instill those boundaries, instill discipline and bring back standards. I asked Katherine what she thought about that.
You hold your standards really high, and I'm holding my hand up here, they'll meet you up there. And if you hold your standards down here, and I've moved my hand down now, the children will meet you there. Whether they are, whatever their background is. Children will always meet you at whatever standards you set for them. And the fact is that, you're just letting those kids down even more when you lower your standards for them.
So the low expectation really doesn't do them any favours whatsoever.
No. No, it does them great harm. The fact is, you don't have to be mean to them to hold them to high standards. You just need to hold them to high standard. They know, if I don't do my homework, I'm going to get a detention. So you give them a detention.
Yeah.
You don't have to snarl at them. You just give them a detention, and then they know it. And then they think, oh, okay, next time I don't want a detention, so I'll do my homework next time.
Yeah.
So our whole sense is about giving them moral purpose, explaining the difference between right and wrong, teaching them gratitude and kindness and self-sacrifice, putting others before yourself, behaving like decent human beings.
Good heavens, that'd be a shock to many students in Australia, behaving like a real human being. Sacrifice. What is that? So a free school can actually set standards of behaviour, set standards of work that is expected, and enforce a discipline that would guarantee that those limits are met. And at the moment, schools in Australia don't seem to be very good at setting boundaries, setting limits, and setting high expectations. Another reason is that the government can insist on certain mandatory training for teachers, like diversity, equity and inclusion training. I asked Katherine if that existed in free schools.
No, there's mandatory training that we have to do from the government says, prevent, for instance, which is the terrorism stuff. There's safeguarding, obviously, but that's all that's coming from government, as it were. In many schools, however, there will be mandatory training that will be up to that school, up to the academy chain that you might be part of. There may be mandatory training in any number of different schools because that school has decided that is mandatory training.
Oh yes, it's from them, but not
exactly.
imposed. Yeah.
But here, no. Mandatory training here is stuff like, I don't know, how to man detention.
It also doesn't mean that the school is run like an army barracks. It can be creative. Here's Katherine again.
I think too often in assemblies, you can find people saying things like, you need to get good GCSE grades because you want to get a good job, right? You should work hard because that means you're going to be really rich later and or own a nice car. That is not something that we talk about, ever. We always talk about the kind of person you're going to be and the kind of person you are and living a life that's worth living. And that's not about making money. That's not about having power. That's about being a certain kind of human being.
Person.
Schools have huge impact on the moral formation of our children. Our schools should immerse children in values that promote cohesion rather than division. We teach our children to be grateful for what they have, however little it may be, to be kind to others, and to love their country. And no matter how often that they're told that they are oppressed, that the establishment is against them because they are poor, or they're black, or they live on an estate, or that white supremacy reigns, it will always be the case that we have agency.
So parents, don't get excited because this does not exist in Australia at the moment. But we have a general election coming on. Perhaps Pauline Hanson and One Nation can come up with an education policy that includes the concept of free schools or open schools. I can't imagine Labor doing it. I can't really imagine Liberals and Nationals doing it. It needs someone to break the mould of our education system for the sake of students, for our children, and for parents, of course.
Phil would really appreciate it if you could like or comment on this episode. Better still, share it with others. Thanks.
So how would this work in Australia? Well, every child gets an allocation according to their age and the year they're going into. So just imagine, for the sake of argument, that every child from kindergarten to year 3 gets a $10,000 allocation to their family. Every child from year 4 to 6 gets, say, $12,000 allocation. Every child from year 7 to 10 gets $16,000, and every student in 11 and 12 gets $18,000. Now, it doesn't come to you. You can't go to McDonald's or Woolworths and spend it. It goes on to your account, where you would then allocate that money to the school of your choice for that year. Well, what about if you decide to homeschool your child, and you decide you're going to homeschool them from kindergarten to year 3? Well, you will get $10,000 per year to you to spend on their education. Fair enough, isn't it?
Young people swim in a culture of instant gratification and live your best life. You do you. Be who you want to be. And if you think Gen Z is bad, just you wait till you see Gen Alpha.
I'm going to use the example of Ron and Alice. Just imagine there's a family with two children. Alice, she's 11 years old and she's in year 5. Ron, he's 14-year-old and he's in year 8. So let's say that Alice, who's in year 5, all year 5 students in Australia are allocated $12,000. So Alice, in the family account, would be allocated $12,000 for that year. Ron, who's in year 8, he gets $16,000. So Ron, for his education, would be allocated $16,000. Now, for both of those amounts, the parents can spend it where they wish. They can spend it at a public school, absolutely fine. They can spend it at a private school, but they might have to top that up. They could spend it at a free school, a school that can have discipline, that can instill accountability and responsibility with students, that doesn't have to abide by government guidelines and controls. That doesn't mean that a school could be set up to promote Islamic State beliefs. It would have to fall within the law, of course. But when Alice shifts out of year 5 and goes on to year 7, she'll be allocated more money. She'll be allocated more for her education. And Ron, when he moves into year 11 and 12, will be allocated perhaps $18,000 for year 11 and 12. During that year, the family might decide, well, I want to shift Ron out of the free school or the open school situation and move him into a different school. And in our scenario, we've got Ron moving to Brisbane Grammar. So that's going to be a lot more money. He'll get the $18,000, or Mum and Dad will get that, and they'll have to add more to go to Brisbane Grammar. If he decided to stay at the free school or the open school or a public school, they wouldn't have to pay any extra at all. So it gives the parents choice according to the school that best coincides with their values.
Yeah, so we have a lot of freedom here. You know, the school advertises for their staff, appoints their staff. They can move their staff on if necessary. That is all up to the school.
So a free school or an open school in Australia could recruit their own teachers and could sack their teachers. They may even put on a staff member who's not a teacher, who may be an excellent musician, an excellent artist who can communicate to the students. Now, teachers' unions will hate that. And you may blame the government for a lot of the content that's coming into the curriculum, but a lot of it is through the teachers' unions. So the free schools would have absolute control, and the unions wouldn't like that very much.
Allowing children who come from more challenging backgrounds off, as it were, just allows those kids to fail. You are not helping those children. What you're doing in that moment is you're helping yourself feel better about the fact that that child has a difficult background. And because you feel bad about it, in order to make yourself feel better about it, you then allow them off the detention or off whatever the punishment might be. That's really about you. It's not about the child, because in the end you are harming the child greatly.
And also, as Katherine said, the idea of being light on a child who's had a difficult background or who's had maybe a trauma background. Yes, that might be okay some of the time, but most of the time we need to insist that they abide by the rules of society and be accountable and not forgive them every time when they do something that's disrespectful. This is the difference between a public school and, unfortunately, what some of the private schools are now becoming. It gives an autonomy, it ensures quality of learning, it gives a sense of choice to parents, and it gives some standards to the students. And one thing I forgot to mention is that some of the free schools in the UK do have an extra payment. For example, if it's a $10,000 payment to your account from the government, you may have to pay an extra $1,000 or $2,000 depending on the location of the school and what they offer. So parents, don't go rushing to Google and try and find a free school or an open school in Australia to send your child to. It doesn't exist here yet. But Pauline Hanson and One Nation and the Liberal Party and Family First and whoever else might be listening, I urge you to take this on as a part of an education platform, because we badly need changes in this country. I'd like to thank Katherine Birbalsingh from the Michaela School in Wembley, the Chalk Talk podcast with Anna Stokke, the Centre for Independent Studies in Australia, the ARC Conference in London, and Matthew Green from The Art of Teaching. My name is Phil Dye. You've been listening to Filtered. Please share this podcast, comment, like it, or even better, become a subscriber through the Substack platform. I'm going to leave you with the voice of Katherine Birbalsingh. See you later.
The policymakers need to do what's hard and make it so that schools can do what we do, which is to hold kids to account, have strict discipline, to have traditional teaching methods. You know, the idea of making teaching fun and interactive, it makes us all think, oh, that feels great for us. And it looks good. Kids put Post-it notes on each other's foreheads and they run around the classroom and, oh, this is great. We're all enjoying ourselves. Yeah, it makes everybody feel good. At the end, they haven't learned anything. Well, yeah, you can remember what you felt. It's great. It was lots of fun. But did you learn anything? And I think what matters is whether or not you learned something.
This has been a basic overview of what Australia's free school system may look like. For more information, email phil@phildye.au.